production. In 2007 and 2008, we have a production that amounts over 25 billion liters of ethanol. This is a slide extracted from some lectures that were presented to us in the National Congress, especially by Dr. Evaristo from Embrapa, which is a body that monitors areas throughout satellite transmission, together with another Embrapa researcher that also addressed the hedges of our rivers and the coastline. Kátia Abreu was the moderator of that debate in the Federal Senate, and it was clear to all of us how important technology and science is. That has to be applied into the field. Amazon forest with a high percentage, and we have patient with 200 million hectares, annual crops, constant annual crops, and planted forests close to 70 million hectares of crop areas. Here we can support sugarcane expansion. In a recent past, we had grown in 1 million tons from 06 to 07, and from 07 to 2008, we had a significant increase over 5 million tons, and we forecast 3,800,000 tons until 2010. Figures here are very impressive, and it shows that advancement throughout the years have been supported over crop and pasture. This is data especially above the past years, where we match a great increase, 77%, around 200 million hectares, with several millions of degraded areas, and that has been based on pastures and also agriculture from 07 to 08, a little bit more regarding agriculture, but also a very significant production as pastures, and we intend to advance in 62% in growing our pasture land. In other sectors, advancement is not meaningful at all. We forecast less than 1% that we would advance in the increase of sugarcane production when compared to crop areas spread around the country and the non-crop areas. Sugarcane is not an established crop based on a single and new production, and that's key to be addressed. We have to reinforce and to make clear how important this meeting is, which is the ethanol growing without deforestation. I would like to greet our consultant, our congressman consultant, Mr. Dolabella, that throughout joint efforts prepared my presentation. We have 210 million hectares for pastures, and we have a head per hectare. Usually we have a head of animal per hectare, but with technological advancements, with integration between crop and harvest, we have advancements, genetics, maneuvers, handling, and in a humble manner, we can state 2.2 heads per hectare. Those of you that work with pastures, you know that we have more than 1.2 per hectare, but that's the average because we want to focus the purpose of this lecture. In case that takes place with the same amount of bovines that we have in the country, and that advancement will be even more relying on agriculture, we are going to have an increase of 35 billion hectares only in pastures, and that's clearly supported the size of that amount. If we save 50% of agriculture and 50% of our reserves, from a mathematical standpoint, we will have over 70 million hectares that will be saved only for agriculture, advancement, and above all, to advance over sugarcane plantation. That projection is 3.5 billion increase for sugarcane, and that's quite clear to say that we have enough land to support that plantation without putting down not even one single tree. This is our current situation, and it's part of our scope, and we will have 35 hectares if we would consider in average 2.5 heads per hectare. That is a quite ramble forecast. Anyone of you that deal with the breeding circle, you know that we no longer just consider 2.2 heads per hectare. As to federal environmental legislation, it's a quite polemic topic, and I'm sure that other speakers will also tackle on that topic. That's a topic that has been very positive, fostering dialogue. If we want to increase ethanol production without deforestation, we have to modernize ourselves. We have to implement state-of-art technology, and also to give growers and producers easy situation. The environmental Brazilian legislation is a quite old one. It dates from 1965, and unfortunately it hasn't developed with our progress, and that is based on a situation where we take into account just the state of environmental people who we highly respected, but they are not totally informed about our demands and needs. This is a topic that we are discussing in the Federal Committee, in the State Senate, and CNA is here. I'm sure that the Senator Kátia Abreu will address about that, because that's crucial to all of us. There are some specific situations in our environmental legislation, Act 23 and Act 24 of the Federal Constitution, showing all the competences that the Union, states, and municipalities have in place. And moreover, we have some other extra acts, such as forestal cut, climate, also regulation of acts, and also the representation of CONAN, ministries, and environmental agencies. We have decrees, legislative acts, and other constitutes, altogether over 16,000, to be more precisely 16,400 scenarios that allow the Brazilian scenario to face a time of reassessment. Dr. Francesco, he is an expert, and he knows very well that it's about time to sit down and try to join efforts to discuss in depth all the environmental legislation. That is a legislation that needs an urgent care. Next slide, please. As to agribusiness, Brazilian agribusiness and environmental legislation as well, there are some conceptual errors. As I said, that was based without the participation of the agro-breeding sector. It does not take into account biosystem and all the hydrographic basins or water bases, and there are some constraints such as the unmatched use of technology and its allocation, and it doesn't consider those sustainable crop areas in hilly areas. That was a polemic discussion that was addressed in the National Congress, and there are some permanent areas of forests, and that was the main focus after establishing our legislation. People would think that maybe 100, 400, and 500 meters away from the river sides, bedsides, that would be enough, but that was not the matter. Our Governor José Serra and the Minister Dilma Rousseff, they were making a reference to Mr. Rodrigues and relationship to Abrapa, agroenergy. that will allow us to have a different standpoint of what matters regarding the new legislation, all of that based on scientific approach. Professor Evaristo has got some data, and it shows that what we have in our country amounts to 78% of area or plot available to take care of indigenous causes, preservation, environmental preservation. That's a very low percentage, unfortunately. We keep talking about deforestation. There is agreement among all Brazilian congressmen, those that may follow that pathway or another one. But altogether, the common sense is we do not want to put down not one single tree in this Brazil. Let's abandon deforestation. And as to sugarcane, we do not promote any time of deforestation. We wanted to foster our production on a certain increase, but also not putting any trees down. We have to respect the crop areas or fertile areas. Federal Constitution and common competence. It's common saying that the common competence between states and municipalities, they have to follow a protocol regarding environmental legislation. The federal constitution states that protecting environment against pollution in any forms and to preserve forests, that should be regulated throughout a complementary act, which unfortunately we haven't got it yet in an efficient manner, at least. There are some propositions to change the forest cut or to avoid deforestation. In my opinion, this slide is key because it supports the sectoral development. If we do not endeavor to increase that situation, we are going to fail to meet the worldwide demands. We are well seen throughout renewable energy, but also other continents, they expect us to be those responsible for biofuel, but we want to advance without putting at risk food supply or any other environmental issue. But some changes have to be made. There are two propositions, at least one of them that will be pointed out in the Congress, especially CNA, represented by the Senator Kátia Abreu, a dynamic lady, and we have to exchange our environmental code that will go through a number of surveys and studies, and I advocate for taking care of emergency right now only. Some changes have to be placed within our forestal code in order to skip out of that severe problem that we are facing right now that lays on the consolidation of forest cut. One of the alternatives in place is to consider APPs for legal reserves with tree species and native species. We have also to consider the legal reserve outside the forest, closer to the water basins, and also to allow some agro activities. My time is almost up. We have to strengthen EERs. That's key. These are all considerations that we are trying to pass on the constituency, on the legislation. And then parallel to that, we are going to discuss environmental issues as part of the environmental code as a whole. Sugarcane plantation will increase in 3.5 million hectares yearly and lower pressure over agriculture plots. 35 million hectares left. They will be enough for Brazil to go on in that pathway, developing for ethanol production and, of course, sugar production. And I'm sure that we will be the country accountable for that change of paradigm throughout the world. Also, climate exchange is something that has to be taken care in our new constitution. We have to regulate environmental infra-constitutional legislation to establish norms and acts that